Well, hey there, everybody. My name is Jake. I get to be the lead pastor of the Port Jervis campus, and yes, it is exciting. So, Port Jervis, I want you to know I have eyes everywhere. I'm watching you. But today is a really exciting weekend for us at the Port Jervis campus. It's really exciting because today, this weekend marks the 1-year anniversary of our launch, Port Jervis. So I hope you're excited. This has been an exciting year. God's been teaching us a lot. He has been busy in our community. He has been busy at our church throughout Orange County and beyond now. So it's been a really exciting year, a year of learning for me personally. As I've been thinking back, one of the things I've been thinking about is that I have been here at Grace for 6 years now. I started here originally we're coming to you live, all the campuses from here in Washingtonville, and I'm looking around. My first job here was to change the light bulbs. That's what I started doing here at Grace in the first place. Never thought I would be here speaking in front of you, so that's a big deal for me. And I've been thinking about how this past year, I've been a lead pastor for 1 year. For as long as we've been launched, that's how long I've been a lead pastor. I don't have a lot of prior, thank you, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So it's been, I just want to be teachable. I want to learn. And one of the things I'm very grateful for, and Port Jervis, I was speaking to some of our volunteers about this recently, but I love getting to do what I do. And I even love who I get to do it with. Port Jervis, I'm very grateful to get to be your pastor. Thank you for letting me do what I do. I love getting to do it. So thank you. And Grace, thank you for letting me be a part here. Thank you for letting me be a pastor here at Grace. I love it. I love you. Your trust is sacred to me. So thank you for letting me do what I do as a pastor here. In this last year, one of the things is I have a team of leaders around me that help me learn. They teach me a lot. I'm very aware of the fact that I've only been doing this for 1 year, and I'm 29 years old. So I'm very aware of that. I hit puberty on Tuesday, so God's still doing a lot in me, changing me in many ways, but spiritually speaking, I'm learning a lot still. So I study. I want to be a student of whatever season I'm in my life right now. Whatever I'm going through, I think whether I'm 29 or 49 or 89 or 99, I want to be teachable. I want to be looking to God saying, what do you have next for me? What are you trying to teach me in the season I'm in right now? I know you have something for me. So I want to be teachable wherever I am. And so one of the things I do is I study other teachable people. I study other teachable people who usually end up being students or professors themselves. And one of them we're going to study today is he's a writer of Ecclesiastes. So if you haven't read this book before, you want to follow along, it's on page 553 in the Bibles in the seat backs in front of you there. You can open it up, follow along. If you don't own a Bible, that is your Bible now. Take that home. That is our gift to you. No one's going to stop you from taking it in this place. So please follow along with us today. But he opens up his book. He opens up his letter to us with a little bit of angst, I would say. If you've heard Bohemian Rhapsody, he kind of opens it up like Freddie Mercury would, where he says, nothing really matters. He says, nothing really matters to me. And the professor says it this way. He says, everything is meaningless. So we're starting off on a really positive note this morning. Everything is meaningless, says the professor, says the teacher. Completely meaningless. What do people get for all their hard work under the sun? Now he uses this phrase that everything is meaningless. It means that everything it's short-sighted, that everything in this life it's the word for, it's but a mist, it's but a breath. It's meaningless. He's saying that it's just skin deep. It seems so shallow. Everything in this life. What do people get? What do people get for all their hard work under the sun? Which is the question we all ask. We all ask the question, what is the point? We all ask the question of, does it really matter? We all ask that big question of why, whether it's tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., when you are filling out the same forms that you've filled out, or you're taking the same meds that you've been taking for however long because you've been sick for however long, or maybe you're like me where you don't ask that question then, but you ask that question at 2 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep, and you're wondering what the reason is, wondering what the reason for your season is, why it is that you're going through what you're going through right now. And the key to Ecclesiastes, the tool you need to crack the code for this book is right here, is under the sun. He uses this phrase 29 times throughout this book, and it's threaded throughout everything to help us understand. He's doing these thought experiments for us to understand how can we squeeze some meaning in this life here, in this context, in the observable universe. And what I love about this book is that it's written from the position of the skeptic, the person who does not believe in an afterlife, the person who thinks that this life is all there is. So it's written from the position of the skeptic because we all have the skeptic in us. Every single one of us, whether you're a believer or not. If you're a believer, you have doubts, right? You have questions of why? Why this? Why this now? We have these questions. So that's him kind of winking at us, saying that there is meaning in this life. But this book is written from the position of the skeptic. And I want you to know, if you are a skeptic, if you are somebody who has doubts, you're somebody who has questions, or you are not a believer, oh, you are so welcome here. You are so welcome here. And I even want to tell you, thank you for being here, because so much of why we exist as a church is for you. So thank you for being here with us today. Your questions, your skepticism, your doubts are welcome here. We all have them. This book just happens to be honest about it. This book of the Bible just happens to go at those questions. The part that blows my mind, that I can't wrap my mind around, is that God is the one who inspired this book to be written from the position that he himself doesn't exist. I'm still not sure I can understand how or why he chooses to do that. But I think he does it because he is most concerned about our trust and our dependence on him. He wants us to trust him. So he had this book written specifically to the heart of our doubts. Anything that would be the enemy of our trust in him. He goes at this, he had this written to get after those big questions we have in this life of what is the purpose? Why are we here under the sun? How can we find meaning here in our place under the sun? Now, it's written by what we're going to call him the professor, because I like that name better than the teacher. So he's a teacher. He is the professor. Now, he announces himself in Ecclesiastes 1. He says it this way. He says, "These are the words of the teacher, King David's son, who ruled in Jerusalem." So he calls himself the teacher. So these are the words of the professor, the son of King David, who Pastor Jared talked about just a few weeks ago. So to give you some context, you should go back and listen to those messages to see who his father was. But he is the third king. Solomon is his name. The professor is the third king of Israel. He is ruling in what is known as the golden age of Israel. The golden age of Israel, where there is peace on all borders of Israel. Can you say that about your life, where there is peace on every side of your life? When you look ahead to the week that you have, that there is no issues. You can't anticipate any issues coming this week. Or you look in the rearview mirror of the last week and maybe it looks like a little bit of a dumpster fire back there, and you're not sure what you're going to do about that. Or the people that you hold hands with, that you are doing life with, that you live with, your family. Is there peace? Or is there tension there? Either way, Ecclesiastes is for you. It answers the big questions. It talks about how to have peace and purpose in our life here under the sun. So this is the professor who is, the third king of Israel. He is somebody who connects the big picture, big questions of why are we here, cosmic concepts, brings them down to the creature, to you and me. How does this apply to our life? What does it mean for us to be here? Why are we here in the first place? How can we squeeze some meaning out of this place in our life? He is the wisest person in history, is the way that the scripture talks about him, that God gave him an extra dose of wisdom so that the surrounding country's leaders would actually come and speak to him and get his counsel, get his advice on things. And he goes through some philosophery, goes through some thinkery, if you will, to help us understand how we can squeeze meaning out of this life. So he goes through these thought experiments. He goes through these ideas talking about life in terms of how to find meaning in whatever life phase we're in or whatever season we are in. So he says it in Ecclesiastes 3:1. He says, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." There he is again with that phrase of everything under the sun. Our time here under the sun, under heaven. How can we find meaning here in the season we're in and in the time that we're in right now? And what he's saying is that every season has its time. So if you hear nothing else right now, maybe you just need to know that there is a time that you are in this season, and this season will end. Maybe you're in a difficult season right now, and you just need to know that God's promise is that this season will end. There will be an end to it. He's promising you that there. So he talks about things in terms of these seasons. In this sphere of understanding, in this life, how do we find meaning in seasons that feel like this? When we have seasons in our life that he goes through this poem where he talks about a time being born, to die, and he goes through this whole list, bookends it with these extremes of being born and death and love and hate and war and peace. So he goes through this whole poem explaining these desirable and undesirable seasons that we all go through. And what I like about the scripture is that it doesn't lie to us and tell us that, nope, everything's good, everything's gonna be fine, it's all good. And it doesn't lie to us and tell us that everything's all bad either. He's telling us that we're going to experience both kinds of seasons in our life. Both things are gonna happen to us. And whatever season you're in, be a student of your season. Have a teachable spirit. Be a student of your season. Because you can either be a student or you can be stuck. You can get stuck in a season if you're not a student of it. So be a student of your season like this. Like there's the desirable seasons that we would like to be in. Everybody's excited about babies, the season of being born, or the season where there's love, or the season where there's peace. Everybody loves those. But be a student of those seasons, because every season has its time, and when that season breaks, when the good thing breaks, you want to know how to fix it. So be a student of the season. Be a student of the season and know maybe why or what conditions got you to that place where things were good. So be a student in that sense. But there's the other kind of season where it might just be a survival season for you, where you are just concerned, you're not worried about studying or being a student of the season. You can just, all you can think about is the next step, taking the next step, getting through the next day right now. And if that's you, that's okay. Do that. Get through it. Get through this season. But if you can, study the season. Start to try to figure out why you ended up in financial ruin, or why there is nothing but tension between you and the ones you have a relationship with, between you and your family or friends. Study that season to figure out how you got there. But maybe it's not as serious as that for you. Maybe it's something more like you are just, no matter what you do, you are cynical. You don't know when, but all of a sudden you started taking yourself really seriously, and you would call yourself a realist, but everything you say has a taste of cynicism behind it. Or if you're single and you're hoping to get out of the single season and you want to be in the married season of your life, just know that the marrieds in here, the marrieds across our campuses, know that there's a season where you're married and you're wishing to be single again. Which is kind of funny, and we can kind of giggle at that, but it is the truth. And to our single folk or our folks that are newlyweds, I am sorry to push you out of the honeymoon phase, but that season will come. There will be a season where it is difficult to be married, and you are wondering, is it worth it? What was the reason again? Why am I doing this? Why am I choosing to be faithful? Why am I choosing to be faithful to my spouse? Why am I choosing to be faithful to my God in this season that I'm in? Those questions come, and that's why I trust the scripture. That's why I like this, is because it doesn't lie to us and tell us, hey, there's a way that you can experience only the good seasons. No, If there's anything in this life that tells you that, it's a lie. There is the way that the professor talks about it, the way that the scripture talks about it. There is a way to experience the desirable and the undesirable seasons differently than you would have in the past. Be a student of your season. And if you're in your 20s right now, I heard this a lot in my 20s, is your 20s is a time where you are trying to develop coping mechanisms for the trauma of adulthood that will be coming. I feel that very much right now. As somebody who uses coping mechanisms, I have some kind of reflexes I have to get through certain difficulties in my day. I'm saying this because my life is not as well put together as my hair would lead you to believe it is. So I have these coping mechanisms. I have these coping mechanisms that I have. But I want to tell you this is, God has so much more for you. God did not put you on this earth just to practice coping mechanisms. He gives you these opportunities. He gives you these seasons for you to grow beyond those mechanisms, beyond what you thought was possible in your life. So you need to be a student of your season, but you also need to see your season in light of other seasons, to get some perspective of where you are, to see your season in light of other seasons. So you're going to do this let's talk about it in terms of the geography of your life. So if your life was visible on Google Maps, if you could see it on Google Maps, or if you're a sinner like my wife, you use MapQuest for some reason still because you like to print out your directions, even though it's 2019, and you can get it on your phone where it tells you the directions. That's besides the point. So if your life, geography of your life, you're on Google Maps. If you zoom in real tight, if you just kind of try to see where you are and you just try to focus in on the season you're in, it looks meaningless. It looks like there's no purpose, like there's no direction, okay? When you zoom in, it starts to look like this a little bit. You cannot tell where you are with this. It looks meaningless. You have no idea what direction you're supposed to go into. Is that grass or throw up? I can't tell. So what we need to do is you need to zoom out. You need to zoom out a little bit, get some perspective, see what is around you. So let's pretend you're right here in the middle. You're right here in the middle, and what you see is that there is a path. There's a path for you. There's somewhere where you've been. Maybe you can look back on a past season and help you understand your season in light of that one. And you can see that there is a path ahead of you. Now, speaking of paths, Fishkill, I want to get your attention, okay? If you are farthest from Port Jervis than anybody else, and I want you to know if you ever want to visit us, the way to do that, there's a path. You just take your horse down the Old Town Road and ride until you can't no more. We'll see you next Sunday. So if you were to back out even more from that path, you start to see the seasons around you a little bit. You start to see you're in the sweet season compared to the areas around you, where it is cold and it is harsh, and you can kind of see where you're going. So you're seeing your season in light of other seasons. You're getting some perspective. Don't just focus in on what you're experiencing right now. You need to back out. And then you can back out even more because you want to try to start with the end in mind and see where you're going. So this was your path, and what your path actually was, in this case, was this is a valley that's formed because a glacier over the years carved out a valley in these mountains. So a lot of time in our seasons, somebody else has experienced what we could be going through right now, and we need to be looking to them. We need to have them speak into our season. So if you want to be a student of your season, there's two things you can do. First thing I would tell you to do is have God speak into your season. He's already said a lot. If you want to hear from him, he has already said a lot about what to do in the season you're in. Go to him. Have a teachable spirit and ask God to speak into your season. And I know I'm completely bypassing the idea of this being written from the place where God doesn't exist right now. I realize that. But go to him. Go to him, have him speak into your season. The second thing I would say is just like this, is that somebody's probably gone through what you're going through right now. Go to somebody you respect. Maybe somebody you admire, which are kind of old-fashioned concepts. But what they mean is somebody that is better than you, but you still like them, which is hard to imagine for some of us, I know. Okay, that one kind of hurt. So it's somebody you respect, somebody that has gone through, who understands, who has some idea of what it's like to go through what you're going through. You go to them and have them speak into your season, have them speak into your life. So we need these things because when we have that survival season, that difficult day, it looks like a lot of different things. It might look like maybe you're an empty nester right now and you're wondering what the reason is because you thought kids were everything. They were your everything. And now they're out of the house. They were the reason for you. They were the meaning behind it all. Or maybe you are one of those kids that are out of the house now and you're graduated or you're about to graduate college and you're going to miss that time with your friends or where there was a clear agenda for what the professor, what the teacher was asking you to do. And now that's gone because it's a completely different ballgame in adulthood outside of college. It's a completely different thing. And you're going to have these big questions. You're going to have these big questions that the professor is asking. You need somewhere to go, and you need to know how to get perspective and see and find the meaning and the reason for the season you're going through right now. So we need to hang on to that because it gets hard. You need to hold that close to the chest because it gets really difficult, especially as we start to ask the big questions. We don't just ask about our season, but we ask about the reason rather, of why we are here in the first place. And the professor goes after these questions. The reason we are here the reason for our season after we've gotten perspective doesn't go away when we back out and see things, not just in light of the pictures I just showed you, but when we see it in light of everything under the sun. What is my purpose? How do I have any meaning if I see myself in light of everything? Well, the professor goes after these kinds of questions. He asks it this way. He goes on to say, what do people really get for all their hard work? So he's asking the same question again. He's asking the question, what's the point? He's back there 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, filling out those forms. Why am I doing this? What is the point? What is the reason for this? He goes on and says, I have seen the burden. I've seen the burden God has placed on us all. That burden that he's going to be talking about, he'll explain it in a minute, is the burden of meaning. We need to find meaning in whatever we're doing. There has to be a reason for it. There has to be a purpose behind what we're doing. We're a people who what we do has to matter for some reason. So he goes on and says that, yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. And pause there because what he's saying, beautiful for its own time, means that you could also read that as for its appointed time or its intended time, meaning God has an intention for you to be going through the season that you're going through. There's a reason for your season, he says. So he goes on to say, kind of unpack why a little bit more. He says, he has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to the end. And the reason that God holds that from us, holds the beginning from the end from us, is because if we knew why we were here in the first place or where we were coming from, we would make our life about that. Or if we knew where we were going, the obvious end or the intentional end or the intended end for what we were supposed to be doing, we would make our life all about that. And we wouldn't learn from the season that we are in. We are meant to be students of our season. Be present in the season that you're in, even if it's painful. Kind of squeeze out what you can from it. So he says he's planted eternity in the human heart. He's planted eternity in the human heart. And the word for heart there means the filter. To the ancient Hebrews, it would have meant the filter through which you see everything. It has to do with your logic, your reasoning skills, has to do with your emotions a little bit, but it's the filter through which you see everything. He's saying here that he's planted eternity in the human heart. He's saying whether you like it or not, you can't help but see things as though there is something beyond this world. There is the limitless reach of the light of eternity in our hearts. We see everything through that lens. Everything has to have meaning to us. For some reason, there has to be a reason we're going through what we're going through right now. And God says that he's the one who put that there. He's the one who causes us to think in that way, to wonder what is the reason for this right now. Now, if you think about if you try to imagine your life, the different seasons that you've gone through, you try to put it into a sculpture maybe, it would look something like this, which when you first look at it, it just kind of looks like a bunch of garbage put together. And maybe you're like, I started this for a while trying to figure out what this is supposed to look like. What is this supposed to be? There's different levels of it. There's different sizes of pieces. And imagine each one of these pieces as a season in your life where God has been putting these seasons together, trying to show you something. But none of it makes sense on its own. None of it makes sense unless you see it in light of eternity, in light of there being something beyond this, in light of there being something beyond ourselves, beyond our life here under the sun. So when you see it with the light of eternity, on the backdrop of eternity, you see that God has been using these seasons to shape who you are, as a person. And I want to say this carefully, is he used the seasons where where the light is blocked out, where it's darkest, to shape who we are just as much as he uses the seasons where the light comes through clearly. Because the shadows prove that the sun shines. So we look at this knowing that God is using these things to shape who we are, as people. So we see our seasons in light of eternity, in light of God having a plan, there being an intended time, an intended purpose for us to see something. So we see our seasons in light of eternity. There's this one quote by a French philosopher he's moody and he's dark, and what he says is that I am tormented atoms in a bed of mud. And I like it because it is dark and it's moody and it's kind of angsty and kind of almost sounds kind of silly, but it can feel that way sometimes. Life feels that way. It feels that way at 2 a.m. when you're wondering why you're having these tensions in your life, why there's no peace in here either, and you're wondering what the purpose is. What is the reason for everything you're going through right now? There's this one song that I was listening to recently that a friend showed me. It's by John Bellion. It's called Stupid Deep. And then the very first verse just captured me. And what he says is, what if who I hope to be was always me? What if the love I fought to feel was always free? What if everything I've done was just an attempt at earning love because the hole inside my heart is stupid deep? Now, when he says stupid deep, he means immeasurably deep, eternity's depth kind of deep. And I need you to know, in case you look him up, he is not a Christian artist, so I don't promote the other songs that he sings. But what's important for us to see in that is he's somebody who is not a believer. He doesn't believe in anything beyond this life, and yet he's saying that there's something in my heart that's stupid deep, that is an eternity kind of depth. And I know that I've been trying to do everything I can to fill it. I've been trying to fill it with love. I've been trying to fight for this kind of love. I've been trying to fill it with trying to figure out who I am. He goes through this existential crisis because we all do. We all start to wonder what the reason is, what the meaning behind it is, why. We ask that question. We ask that question of why. And that's what the professor was asking. And years after the professor, the wisest man to ever live, years after he had written Ecclesiastes, after he was done connecting these cosmic concepts to the creature so we can understand our life here, there was the creator of the cosmos who came and became a creature like you and me, who became a human to explain to us the ultimate truth so we can understand the reason. Now, John talks about this in his book. He explains it really well. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory." So John says this in the first century, and it's very timely. There's a season of time where this needed to be said, because to the Greeks at that point, there was all these different schools of thought that were looking for what this word meant, because this word for word is where we get our word for reason or logic. So they were trying to figure out what the word, what the reason for life was. All these different schools of thought, nobody could agree on what the reason was. So they started to feel meaningless again. And right in the mix of that is when John chose to write this, saying that the reason was there at the beginning. And the reason he has come and he dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. The reason is Jesus. Whatever it is that you're going through, the reason for your season is wrapped up in understanding Jesus himself. Now, the way that we can understand this is that there's an intended purpose for our life. That's what he's saying, that there is a reason for your life. There's a reason for what you're going through. There's a reason. God has a plan for you. But the way I would explain it is like if you were using an ice cream scoop to try to cut down a tree, I would tell you there's a reason you're having such a hard time cutting down that tree, or why your ice cream tastes so bad. Or it's also, you could look at it in like if you're firing an arrow. You're shooting an arrow and you hit the target, you hit it dead in the center, you hit the bullseye, and then someone comes along and says, that wasn't the target you were supposed to be aiming for. There's this target over here. You missed the mark. That's where we get our word for sin. Where when we try to be God and define what our purpose is, what our intended purpose is, what the meaning for our life is, where we're supposed to be going, what target we're supposed to be aiming at, that's where we get that. That's where we get caught up trying to be little gods ourselves, when there is a God who has given us the reason, who he has wrapped that up, this cosmic choreographer who has been designing things the way that they were supposed to be in the first place, this cosmic architect. Now, I don't want to throw around words like sin casually, because there's people who have been affected by sin just as much as there's people who commit sin. And maybe you're looking at me that way, where it's like, yes, I know there's sin in the world. I know there's evil in the world. I've been affected by it. And now I think about things I've learned through this, is that I think about things in terms of song lyrics, apparently a lot. And maybe it's too late to say sorry about that at this point. But there's this one song by the Foo Fighters, actually, of all bands. And what he says is that he's speaking to somebody as if they understand exactly what I'm talking about here. So maybe you're looking at me this way, where you might be saying to yourself, or saying to me in your heart, well, that's easy for you to say. Is the song lyrics, that's easy for you to say. Your heart has never been broken. Your pride has never been stolen. And it's true that I probably haven't had to endure what you have endured. I probably haven't had to experience what you've had to experience, but I want you to hear this, not from me, not even from the professor, but God had this written because he wants us to know that there is a reason. And God himself, your Father in heaven, his heart was broken when his son was sent to the cross for you and for me. The pride of heaven, Jesus himself, was broken so that you and I can know that he understands. That he understands. And that when you've trusted this world, or when you've trusted yourself to be the little g God in your life and to make your own reason, or you've trusted somebody else's reason for your life, and because you thought that would be enough, that would fill that hole in your heart, and that would make everything okay. And you find out that was a lie, and it wasn't enough. You can know that Jesus is enough for you. Because the reason, Jesus himself, the reason came and dwelt among us because he's enough. The reason came and gave his life up He lived a life we couldn't, and he died a death we wouldn't, because he's enough. And on the cross, he asked the big questions. He asked, why? My God, why? Why have you forsaken me? That soul-crushing feeling we get when we've experienced meaninglessness, Jesus experienced on the cross when he reached out, asking why, and got no answer. And the answer for your why is Jesus. Jesus is the answer for you. Jesus is enough for you. He's the one thing that will make sense of everything. So will you trust him? Will you trust him? There is a reason for your season. There's a reason for you going through what you're going through right now. And his name is Jesus. Would you pray with me? Lord, thank you that you came, that you did not just leave us here to wonder why or what is the purpose of what we're doing here, but Jesus, you helped us understand by coming and putting on this creation, putting on your own creation and looking like us, that we would know that you understand. You understand what it's like. So we look to you, Jesus. We put our trust in you, where we have skepticism, where we have doubts, and we have these questions. Big questions these are, Jesus. Pray that we would lean into you, because we're always going to have those questions. So I pray that we would trust you with the answers. We trust that you are enough for us, that you have the reason, that you are the reason, that the reason didn't just come as a set of rules or philosophy for us to apply to our life or for us to follow, but the truth came, the reason came as a person, and it's you. So we trust you. We pray all of it in your name. Amen.